All right, good to see you.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to City Club Missoula's May Forum, the 2025 Legislative Session Review. I'm Alex Karklins. I have the great privilege of serving as chair of the City Club Missoula Board of Directors in 2025. Oops. Thank you all for being here today. City Club's mission is to bring together people to inform and inspire citizens on issues vital to the Missoula area community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging topics. Some sincere thank yous first. Let me thank Missoula Community Access Television for recording all of our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. You can view past forums on MCAT's YouTube channel. A special thank you to our executive level sponsors, Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping expand audience access and public awareness of upcoming forums. We are grateful to all of our sponsors at all sponsorship levels for their generosity and advocacy for our mission. We invite you to join as a sponsor or as a member by visiting cityclubmissoula.com. Thank you to our board of directors and especially our administrator, Jenny Rohrbach, who keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes. City Club would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom may be present with us today at this forum. Today we honor the path they have shown us, caring for this place for generations to come. Finally, 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of City Club Missoula. Thank you to all of those who have participated in our forums, provided sponsorships, and volunteered their time as board members over the years. We owe our current success to you. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our moderator for this session right here, Eric Dietrich. He's deputy editor for the Montana Free Press. He's a journalist and data designer and the founder of the Long Streets Economic Reporting Project. He has worked for the Great Falls Tribune, Bozeman Daily Chronicle, and Solutions Journalism Network. I'll let you introduce the other panelists.
Thank you. Oh, no. Thanks for giving me an excuse to get out of Helena Hall. Our panelists today, we have Senator Ellie Boldman, who was first elected to the state capitol in 2010 and is now one of the state's longest-serving elected officials, as well as the most senior legislator from Missoula County. She's a practicing attorney, has served as the executive director of the Poverello Center, and was named Missoula's best activist by the Missoula Independent for, according to the bio she provided, 11 consecutive years. And then we have Senator Greg Hertz, who was born in Malta and raised in Lake County. He attended schools in Polson and Ronan. He's also been in the legislature a long time, including down further in his bio. He served in the House starting in 2013 and was the Speaker of the House in 2019. He's been in the Senate since 2021 and is currently the chair of the Senate Taxation Committee. And I think we're going to save time because I know our panelists have a lot to say, so we'll let me leave the rest of those bios on the floor.
We do, but before Ellie starts, I got to issue a disclaimer here. And so I'm going to do my best Joe Friday here, and what you're about to hear is the truth, as mostly as we could remember in the last 90 days. The names may change to protect some of the innocent around here. And also, just remember, we're going to try to be nonpartisan up here, so just the facts, ma'am, just the facts.
That's right. Are we ready?
You're up, Senator.
Let's rock and roll. Okay. So I have an informative slideshow for all of you. And it's only going to cover microphone. I'll use the mic. Okay. Yeah, will ya? Well, since we have the Queen of Egypt here, former City Club board member Susan Hay-Patrick, raise your hand if you don't know who Susan is. Well, it's the Queen of Egypt's 70th birthday tomorrow. So I would like to thank Susan for your early support over 20 years ago, because I was obviously elected to the legislature. All right. Okay. Introduction. Go ahead, Susan. You heard the introduction of me, but I do want to acknowledge the other legislators in the room. Representative Melody Cunningham, former Senator Cliff Larson, former Senator Mary Moe, former Senator Cynthia Wolken, and did I say Cliff Larson? Yeah. Representative Adam Hertz, where's he? He's here. Now, there's something you need to know. We call Greg megahertz and Adam mini hertz. Anyway, I want to also share that I have been in the legislature now for nearly 15 years, and I do want to reflect on what that means, because this is the family room here, right? We're all Missoula. And think about what it means in the 15 years. When I started, Brian Schweitzer was the governor, and Democrats held all the statewide offices. Max Baucus was in the Senate. Now we hold none, no statewide offices. My dear beloved John Angut has passed, who was one of my early supporters, Ron Erickson. And in this picture, you can see all of the people that I started with are no longer in office, and some have passed. So I do think it's always good as Missoulians that we reflect as a citizen legislature, the folks that have come and served before us and that are here, and that will continue to carry the torch. So, next slide, Susan. We walked into the other way, Susan. We walked into the 69th legislative session knowing that elections matter. So look at the results. When the Republicans said that they had a mandate, they kind of did, right? But here's the difference. Actually, that's wrong. Democrats picked up 12 seats in the state capitol. That was largely due to redistricting. That's going to matter as this conversation continues today, because the makeup in the bodies were different and changed what bills passed and failed based on those state election results. Next slide. So you get an idea. So for the next hour, you are a citizen legislator. This is what it feels like. I'm going to try to cover in 10 minutes 1,700 bills for you. That's what it looks like. This is what it physically looks like. How does a bill become a law? In 90 days, not very efficiently. The Montana Constitution has us meet every other year for 90 days. We're one of very few states that's what's called a citizen legislator. That means I'm a lawyer. We all have teachers and doctors and ranchers and nurses, firefighters from Butte, lots of retired folks. Not looking at Greg. You're not retired. You're still working a lot. But my point is, a citizen legislature means we still have families back home. I have soccer games with my son that I'm driving back and forth. And it means that we have to try to be the best we can subject matter experts for everything wrong in the state of Montana. So it's a lot of work. And again, Senator Hertz and I will do our best to try to cover some of that for you in the next half hour or so. Next one. She's coming. So we walked into the legislative session knowing that bipartisan interim committee still works, right? And what we knew, one of the big thing was there going to be Republican mandate, Democrat minority, bipartisan coalitions? And if you follow the news, you probably saw a lot of the sexier stuff was about this idea of these bipartisan coalitions. The media, I felt like, made it seem like it was this new idea. But in the 15 years I've been there, it wasn't new. We've always had sort of these common sense coalitions, caucuses, solutions caucus. This time they called them the Nasty Nine. But the legislature's always been a makeup of Republican, Democrat, urban, rural, men, women, the Native caucus. So I think it's really a lot more complex than just this idea that there's this sort of moderate middle that sides with the Democrats to help move legislation through. I did want to just bring up the Ellsworth distraction. There was, in my time, something that I'd never seen, and that was this idea that we were really engaged in almost a prosecution of the former Senate president. The rule, 51-26-1, that's something, as you're now a citizen legislature for today, that's what you always have to remember. Because again, it's not Republicans versus Democrats. It's just how do you get to 51 votes in the House, 26 in the Senate, and finally the one, which is that the governor in Montana can not just veto, but line item veto everything out of the work that you've spent 90 days doing. Next slide. So we came in with knowing that the two big items, at least we thought, were going to be Medicaid expansion and judicial reform. I say, is it judicial reform or a tax on judiciary? Of course, that's your perspective. I'm a member of the state bar, and so I have my perspective on that. Next slide. These are the big things we passed. Balanced budget. We're going to talk about that. The Trust Act. Major property tax release. That was really a session agenda, and Senator Hertz is the expert on that, and he's going to talk about that. The amount of investment we made in education is something I've never seen before in public education. And then, of course, the big issue, Medicaid expansion, which is now we don't have to reauthorize it anymore. We did it in 2015, 2019, and now, finally, I think we're done with that conversation. Oh, Representative Hertz, look, you made the cut here. So next slide. I meant your son. Okay, the Go Trust. You're going to hear a lot about the Go Trust. Next slide, Susan. Once in generational opportunity, much like the Coal Trust, it's billion. Let me, how much that, sorry. Go Trust. Yeah, Lou Jones, the Go Trust, it's $600 million in the first year, $400 million in the second, and it's going to create funding for childcare, water. I mean, I could go on and on. This is a big deal, what we've done. An investment for the future. Next slide. Property tax relief, Senator Hertz, you're going to talk more about that, but it didn't pass till the last 2 days of the session. It was a lot of conversation. In a nutshell, though, because we waited till the end, you're going to get a one-time rebate. You're going to get significant tax relief on your owner-occupied homes. If you have long-term rentals, my husband and I do, you also get a property tax there. But if you're one of thousands of non-Montanans who have a second home in Montana, then you're not going to get a reduction. Income tax. Next one, Susan. Next one. And the next one. Yeah, income tax. Keep going forward. There we go. So House Bill 337 was the governor's main priority. Most of the Democrats did not vote for this because we didn't think that it touched enough of the middle and low income. But you can see right there, if you're in the top bracket, 5.9 down to 5.4. Next slide, Susan. Okay, the investments we've made in public education are huge. It's arguably the most significant in recent memory. We can talk, if you have questions about the STARS Act, special ed, inflationary adjustments to school. You can go on and on that one. Next slide, Susan. Higher ed. So we talk about the three branches of government at the state level, but from my perspective in Missoula County, it's our partnership with the dream team right here, your three county commissioners, Mayor Davis and our wonderful city council, but also the University of Montana. And those three legs of the stool are something that's really important to us when we represent Missoula in the legislature. The investments we made in higher ed in the University of Montana are unprecedented. And we can talk more about that. Next slide. But you will physically see infrastructure changes at the U. You'll see teacher pay go up. Employees received a pay raise, 2.5%. We have a new cybersecurity hub, on and on. Next one. Oh, Medicaid expansion. We talked about that. 75,000 Montanans in rural critical access hospitals will have access to critical care. It's absolutely important. The reason Medicaid expansion, though, needs to be discussed is, ultimately that's why the governor got involved in the primaries that ended up causing the friction in the session in the first place, right? Because that was a priority, frankly, to the governor. Next slide. We have a lawyer for the Held case here, Mark Sturmitz. The Held case at the Montana Supreme Court, of course, was a landmark decision. There was a number of bills meant to counteract that decision. Next slide. Abortion. So in November, voters, of course, passed CI 128. This is an initiative that affirmed our constitutional right to privacy for abortion. There were a number of bills related to that. Most of them failed. Next slide. Transgender rights. Again, this is kind of a national phenomenon now, right? Bills that immediately spark legal action. In fact, the bathroom bill is already under litigation. It went to the courts the next day. Again, because of this moderate coalition of Democrats and Republicans, most of the transgender bills also died. So it's really a phenomenon that I haven't seen in other sessions. Next slide. Oh, so I'm not sure if we have any members of our Indigenous caucus here, but Montana has one of the largest American Indian caucuses in the country. Lots of really landmark bills came out of that. The most importantly, my colleague and office mate, Missoula's Senator Shane Morajo, after 10 years of trying, we finally now have an Indigenous Peoples Day in the state of Montana. Next. 10 minutes for 1,200 bills. I'm almost done here. All right. Housing crisis, next one. So Senator Greg Hertz and I have the really great pleasure to be appointed by the governor on what's called the Governor's Housing Task Force. We've been on that for several years now. The housing crisis is urban, it's rural, it's tribal, and it affects everyone. And frankly, it's affecting our local businesses, right? If you can't get a barista, or as I said, when the Taco Bell on Reserve Street was closed because they didn't have enough staff because of housing, then you know you have a problem. Session after session, we continue to try to get in front of the housing crisis in Montana. A lot of bills, good bills passed on that front. We're almost done. I know I'm out of time. Infrastructure, these are the final ones. We put in a ton of money for our new prison. You know, we send about 600 inmates out of state right now. Montana prisoners are being sent to Mississippi and Arizona. We're working on that. We have great improvements coming to Warm Springs. And the big thing for the county was we're now going to start paying and footing our bill for the folks that our county jail has been housing, the mental health folks, for years. We finally got that done thanks to Senator Slotnick and others, including Matt Jennings, our county attorney. Behavioral health, same thing. Generational investments in mental health and crisis care. And I will say this, you know, it's really popular to say that Missoula is the redheaded stepchild at the legislature, but frankly, it's Boldman. But it's because of these guys, and it's because of our fire chief and Matt Jennings and your county commissioners and your city officials. We really, in Missoula, we have innovative programs that the rest of the state is now copying, frankly, and we're funding them. I almost promise it's less.
How many more slides do you have?
I have two more.
Two more?
slides.
Okay.
Okay, Strohmeyer, choo-choo. Gosh darn it, if everybody in this room can help us next year. There's bipartisan folks that really care about this issue, and it barely died in the Senate, and I think next session we can finally see this. But this is such a cool thing, and it would be great for Missoula and great for the state. And now we're at the end. I promise. Okay, so I knew we were going to run out of time. There's so many other sexy things to talk about. Marijuana, styrofoam, right to work, the film tax credit. High five, Senator Hertz. Lots of cool things have now been vetoed, continue to be maybe vetoed today, and some things have passed. And we'd be happy to keep talking about more, but I just didn't want you to think that I forgot about a whole bunch of other legislation. Thank you very much. I'm here for questions.
Well, thanks, Ellie, and I did succeed. I guess 5 minutes of my time to you, so that works out just fine here. So, yeah, Medicaid was a big deal. That was done. I don't need any slides. That was done before we even got there. That was off the table the end of February. It was going to happen, and so we got that done. And it's the first time I voted for Medicaid expansion in any session. You know, it's proven to work out there, and I think it's something we continue to need. Ellie mentioned a budget, a balanced budget. We did not have a balanced budget. That's why the governor is still cutting bills, killing bills, vetoing bills. One of the first bills he vetoed was mine, Senate Bill 167, $10 million into the Weed Trust Fund. You would have thought that's a no-brainer, but you know, his veto letter basically said, hey, look, it was in my budget. I had worked with the governor's office to get that done. We have a lot of invasive weeds across Montana, and but unfortunately, he said, you know, we need to eliminate that, and that was one of the first things on the chopping block, unfortunately. Income taxes is, I wanted income tax cuts to work from the bottom up. And that's what we started with in Senate Bill 203 in the Senate. And basically, there's two brackets in Montana, a 4.7 and a 5.9. You hit the 5.9 right about $20,000 of taxable income as a single person. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to move that up to $100,000 for a single person and $200,000 for a married couple, and we did that in the Senate. It flew across second reading, 47-3, but then there was some partisan politics got involved, and it ended up passing 38-19, and then went over the House, and it died over there, primarily because the Speaker had his own bill that was coming our way. But even with the Speaker's bill that brought the top rate from 5.9 down to 5.4 over a couple of years, we did increase that 4.7 bracket up. So now if you are you're going to get about a 1% tax reduction for people in the income brackets from about $35,000 to $62,000 for a single person, double that for married, 72 to 125. You're going to see a 1% reduction in your income taxes, a little bit more focused. The people at the top are going to see a half a rate over a couple years. But everybody enjoys all those rate cuts because, as you know, tax brackets are stacked on top of each other, and you get a benefit to those. But it's unfortunate Senate Bill 203 was not the vehicle. Luckily, the governor's preferred vehicle to bring the rate down to 4.7. I worked hard. I killed that in Senate tax. I said that's just too much to bring down. It's going to cost us too much money. Luckily, that I killed that bill in Senate tax along with other Democrats and Republicans. Otherwise, our budget would have been another $100 to $50 million underwater. So with my remaining few minutes, we'll talk about property taxes. So on your tables, there's 3 handouts. You can look at those. That provides some information. One of them is, it kind of looks like this. It says from the Montana Taxpayers Association. It provides basically current law, where you're at. Residential rates have always been the preferred rate in Montana, 1.35%. So you can see if you have residential property on this chart for 500 mills on a $100,000 home, that's $675. But if you have non-centrally assessed utility, you're paying $4,000 on that same value, or $6,000 on a pipeline, $3,000 on telecommunications. So we do have a very progressive tax rate that is directed towards businesses in Montana. So the most complicated sheet is one that says Montana property taxes, very small print. Senate Bill 542-231 passed in the 2025 legislature. The top line actually has a misinformation. You're going to get a $400 tax rebate, but you do have to apply for that. It got amended at the last minute where you had to apply, where in the past, if you would have automatically gotten it if you had gotten the rebate last session. So that's going to be a $400 check. I'm not a big fan of that, but $90 million bill just to give $400 per 230,000 taxpayers. So thought we could have done something better with the money. But this breaks down the different years. Tax year 2024 shows you where we're at right now, the different tax rates. Tax year 2025, that's where we kind of start getting a little more complicated. We now have the most complicated property tax system in the entire United States. It is crazy how, and I can tell you what, most legislators who voted for this bill, I suspect don't understand what it did. I'll probably tell you, most elected officials, whether it's city council, county commissioners, school board members, a lot of them won't understand this. I've already talked to my commissioners. They had no idea what we passed. Some of them good. I think Commissioner Slotnick, he probably understands this thing correctly. And 2026, it even gets more complicated. You have to apply for a homestead exemption. But there's a lot of information in here. And then there's a sheet. It starts with County 42, and it kind of shows you what a potential savings might be for you. Unfortunately, here in Missoula, over a 2-year period, your average home is probably going to go only down about 10% in property taxes. Why? Because the average value of a home in Montana, these new rates are based on the average value, which is about $375,000, but in Missoula, the average value of a home is about $500,000, and it looks like it's going up to $600,000. So the higher value your home, the less savings you're going to see in this particular process. So it's not as great as people are trying to sell to you, and that's why I voted against it. I really don't. I think in 3 or 4 years, we're going to be right back where we were, because people are going to continue to vote for levies because they want nice facilities like this in their, and city council and county commissioners are going to continue to have to increase their budgets as school board members are. So the problem with our property tax system, so right here, a house in Missoula might pay $5,000 in property taxes. That same valued home in Flathead County is probably about $3,200. Why? Voter choices. That's what's great about property taxes. You can decide what you want in your community. You want a facility like this. You want $12 million dedicated to free bus transportation in Missoula. You want $10 million for your parks. There's a lot of other things that you have voted for here in Missoula. That's why your property taxes are higher than in other places. And so property taxes truly are locally controlled. We can't really come in here and control your property. We can change the tax rates, and that's what we've done. And so we're shifting taxes from one taxpayer to another taxpayer, particularly some utilities, regulated utilities. Their taxes are going to go up significantly. Guess where that's going to end up? It's going to end up on your utility bill. And you can see that right now on your Northwestern Energy bill. It's got a separate line item, how much property taxes you pay. This also has a potential in here for reducing rent. I suspect it's probably not going to fall down to the renter. Why? Because as you all work on your homes, maintenance costs have gone through the roof. Anytime you buy stuff to maintain your property and casualty insurance has gone up. And your property taxes has gone up, along with a number of other items. So I suspect what a lot of landlords are going to do, they're going to look at this and say, okay, I really probably can't afford to pass this on, but I'm not going to raise rent. So I think it might level off rent a little bit. And plus, I mean, there is so many new multifamily units going up here in Missoula and other places. That has really started to impact the market already. I think rates have somewhat stabilized, although my son, former representative and council member, Adam Hertz, could probably fill you in more on that since he does a lot of real estate development right here in Missoula. So, you know, I really don't have time to walk through all these. I just kind of wanted to lay these out on your desk, maybe in table talk. You can talk a little bit, but, you know, you look at Missoula County, some of these numbers out here, you talk about home sites, that's your primary residence, so you can kind of see over a couple years what that's going to do. But 2025 is not going to look too bad for most people, but hold on to your hats in 2026, because if you have a family cabin, a second home, etc., your taxes on that could go up from 50 to 100%. And it will be dramatic. And there's going to be landlords who are probably not going to apply, and they're going to miss out for their little property tax reduction too. But there's also some loopholes in here. Anytime I look at legislation, I start putting my thinking, how am I going to work around these laws that have been passed? Well, that's just what I do as a legislator. And as a business owner, I'm always trying to reduce my own taxes. But there are some loopholes in here that, oh my goodness, you can drive a freight train through. And the best one that I like is, you know, you might be paying, you might have a $2 million house and you're paying a 1.89% tax rate. I can get that down to 1.35. How? I get my land classified as agricultural, and then every residential unit on that agriculture, including all my short-term rentals, if I got 10 acres and I got multiple short-term rentals on there, I can all of a sudden reduce my property taxes. So there's a lot of different loopholes. It's really going to encourage more cherry orchards up on Flathead Lake, and you know, short-term rentals up there. So unfortunately, that's what happens when you do last-minute, you know, amendments to bills and you don't have the right people in the room. And that's what we ended up doing here. So with that, looks like my time is about up. And thank you, Ellie, so I didn't have to talk too much about property taxes. We also have some constitutional issues that maybe Eric will discuss here in some of the bills we've passed. We've really gotten out of control at the legislature. We are coloring outside the lines, as I would talk to my granddaughters about it. And the courts need to wrangle us back in and tell us to, you know, knock it off. Make sure the public can participate, and that's where we need to.
I'm thrilled to hear your unfettered support of our courts, Senator Hertz.
I am at times, yes. Thank you. That'll finish it up.
There we go.
First question for Senator Hertz. You mentioned the ag tax loophole. There were bills this time that would have tried to close that. They didn't end up going through. Could you talk about those and in the dynamics there?
Yeah, sure. So some of those ag loopholes that we're trying to close up, they were well-intentioned, but anytime you got to treat similar taxpayers similar. You see, you can't just like people, why don't you just charge non-residents more for their real estate? Well, sorry, you can't really do that, so we got to fix these little gimmicks about homestead. Same with a sales tax. You can't just charge non-residents a sales tax and residents not. So, but those ones really touched on, you know, true agricultural producers. And so you get everybody looped in to that particular problem. And so you just have to have rules and regulations that apply to everybody. And sure, are there going to be people who work around the loopholes? Yeah, they will be, just like we have with this new law now.
Yeah, so the concern with the ag tax is that the state's rules for qualifying as ag tax if you're a property that's perhaps in a gray area are perceived as being relatively loose. But moving on. Next question. Wanted to ask about a sales tax for both of you. Some of the conversation around the property tax issue was, oh my gosh, this is hard to fix because we're a state without a sales tax. Of course, there's a lot of people that like not having a sales tax in the state. The governor opposes it. But that was a conversation I heard play out in the building, particularly around, like, if we had a sales tax, maybe it'd be easier to take some burden off of residential. Where are each of you at on that issue currently?
You go first.
Oh, thanks. I've always supported a statewide general sales tax. I think it's a good idea. I think Montana's making a mistake. We have 13, 14 million tourists roaming through the state, and we need to scrape some money off them. And when it comes to reducing property taxes, all we did was shift. Either you have to reduce budget and spending, which isn't practical, or you need to find another source of revenue. So our other source of revenue would be a statewide general sales tax. I know a lot of people like a local option tax. I don't like that because in the top 7 cities, all have a sales tax, and I would rather let's just go to a statewide general sales tax. That's my feeling.
Yeah, so you're right. That was the conversation in the hallways for sure. We knew that Governor Giaforte had made some campaign promises. We did see some bills that were kind of close to sales tax, right? Senator Kastmeyer, of course, was carrying one of the governor's main agendas that died on a 25-25 vote on the last day of the session, and that was to create an additional tax on luxury sales cars. And so there were a lot of things that touched on the idea. We didn't call it a sales tax, though. We called it a fee. But I have been a long supporter and originally introduced by our former mayor, John Engen, and now our county commissioners on the idea of allowing for a local option sales tax to allow community voters to take that on themselves for hotels and Josh could give me a lecture here, rental cars and whatnot. I think that should be up to voters to decide. We've continued to have a lot of pushback at the legislature. I do think that in the next several sessions, this next session, Greg and I are going to be back. We're what's called holdovers, and we're a holdover with the governor. But I do think that whoever the next governor is, it is probably a realistic conversation that will happen during the next several sessions that sales tax will be a real thing. Again, just because the idea of now our economy in the state is much different than it used to be. The extractive industries and the money we got from that tax base is no longer there. And so we have to get the money from the tourists. And that's a real common sense way to do it. So
is that saying I support a sales tax?
It's, did I say local option sales tax?
You can say yes. There was actually a sales tax in the House that it was a constitutional initiative, and then another bill, companion bill, never made it out of House tax, I believe. And it was basically a statewide general sales tax that would primarily replace school taxes, which are about half of your property tax bill, except for bonded levies. If you want to build a new school, you would still have to pay for that locally.
Another piece of the conversation around the property tax piece was the constitutionality question. I think some of that was more procedural than in terms of the policy. But Senator Hertz, you said a lot on the Senate floor about how you think that bill could be challenged in the courts. Do you expect to see lawsuit over that bill, or those bills, that package rather?
Yes, I do, and I expect to see lawsuits over several bills that we passed in the legislature. I mean, Article 5, Section 11 of the Montana Constitution says, when a bill is first introduced, you cannot dramatically change what the primary intent of that bill was for as it moved through the process. Senate Bill 542, the main property tax bill, started out as a 2-year freeze on property taxes. It came back to us as it was a 2-page bill, I believe. Came back to us as a 40-page bill with all other kinds of things shoved into it. It had one hearing the day before we sine died because staff said, hey, look, if you don't have a hearing, this is probably going to get ruled unconstitutional. And so they created a bogus conference committee that had a hearing on the damn bill. And
I find
that
it
was
so ironic right now,
Yeah.
Senator Hertz.
It's just like, all right. So, and then 231, which is a 40-page bill. If you want to read that thing, don't look at the first 39 pages. Because the last 2 pages basically said, the first 39 pages don't apply. It's now just the last 2 pages that we're amending into 542. And best of luck in knowing what you just voted for in the last 2 days.
Senator Boldman, do you share that analysis?
Well, I just find the irony of the architect of hijacking bills in conference committee. Now, no, it is. So as long as it's in the bill title, and if the bill title was generally revised property tax, then you could probably have fit it into the subject matter. But it's not unusual in a 90-day session for a bill to be what's called so-called hijacked and turned into what amounts to Frankenstein.
Yes, I referred to as Frankenstein. I was, in my earlier days, a hijacker of bills. And in fact, Senate Bill 319, which made it all the way to the Montana Supreme Court in 2024, generally revised campaign finance laws, was ruled unconstitutional because of some of the amendments we put on in a free conference committee. And I have seen my ways now. And no, I believe, and really because I've been here a while, it's like, okay, guys, this is really getting out of hand. What we saw this session was more like in 2015 and 17 that, both Ellie and I went through. And I thought we had kind of put that behind us, but it really raised its ugly head this particular session again. And so I think we need to wrangle either ourselves in, or the courts need to come in and say, okay, guys, you really need to start following your rules and the Montana Constitution.
To contextualize what we're hearing from the politicians here, it is a long tradition of the legislature that if you're the majority party or the coalition that has a working majority in the legislature, that the ends justify the means, and we need to get this through, and we're going to do what we need to do to get this passed. And if you're on the losing side, traditionally the Democrats, right, you typically critique the process. We hear a lot of that rhetoric. And of course, with the dynamics that we had this time, some of those dynamics were flipped, which is part of what I suspect we're hearing. Again, next question. I think I heard Senator Boldman say we passed a balanced budget, and I heard Senator Hertz say we didn't pass a balanced budget. Could we talk about why we're perhaps talking past each other on that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think it's just
A matter of perspective.
It is. So we knew the governor was going to veto some bills, and we knew he was going to line item stuff. So I guess if you want to say, yeah, when the governor gets all done with this, it'll be a balanced budget. I mean, even right now, even when he starts line item stuff, in 28 and 29, we have more expenditures than we do revenues coming in. So come back in 2027, we're going to have to make some further adjustments. And there's going to be some Democrat bills, and for the Democrat coalition in the Senate, I'm guessing some of those bills that they are handed down to the governor's desk are going to get vetoed. Maybe they didn't make a good enough deal to get it signed all the way to the end. So they're going to see some bills that are getting vetoed, and I suspect even a couple of my bills might get vetoed too.
But in large part, right, the governor's budget is what we are seeing today. And I think isn't that interesting, because I think many of us in this room probably don't particularly think of Governor Greg Gianforte. I don't necessarily as a moderate Republican. But at the same time, now, this is my third governor I've worked with, is that when they do get to be on what we call the second floor, they still have to govern. They still have to keep our jails and public safety and all of the administrative branches of government, crisis care, mental health, they still have to govern. And so what you saw in large part was factions of Republicans who were really partnering with Democrats to bring forward the governor's agenda. So even though perhaps it's not characterized in the media that way, that's really what we're left with.
And part of what we're seeing with the discussion around the budget, too, is that the budget does technically balance if you look at the status sheet through 2027, but the full impact of the income tax cut in particular, which I think is aside from the Go Trust, is the biggest expenditure on the balance sheet, that doesn't fully take effect until the next 2-year budget cycle, which is part of what's going on. So the long-term projection is tighter.
Yeah, the governor estimates the tax cut which again, the Democrats didn't vote for the income tax cut. You can take that for what it is, but it will reduce state revenues by $278 million by the year 2028. And so that from our perspective, wasn't worth the income tax to what we felt was more of the wealthier Montanans.
And it would have been $325 million hadn't Senate tax killed the governor's
Thank you.
income tax bill. So saved you a little bit.
He's the chair of Senate tax, so thank you, Senator Hertz.
Last question before we break for table questions for Senator Boldman. One of the things that was in the governor's budget initially was money for a green roof for this building. My understanding is that I saw that pulled out in the infrastructure subcommittee that you sit on, and I don't think it got back in. Am I correct on that? And if so, what happened?
Okay, yeah. So I serve on what's called Section F. It's the Santa Claus Committee. We get to spend money on infrastructure, and I think you're talking about House Bill 5.
6, I think.
6,
yeah. One of the laundry list infrastructure bills.
Right. So just to give you an idea of the kind of money that's spent on infrastructure projects in the state of Montana, we had $325,000, I think, for the new John Angan building, right? Let me see what else we got in there.
I'm going to be really impressed of all those projects in your stack of papers.
$114,000 for historic Missoula, $20,000 for International Choral. And here's some of the programs, because I know we have bear bait dance in some of the room. At $20,000 each, everyone from Missoula Children's Theater, Missoula Symphony, Zootown Arts, Missoula Art Museum, Missoula Writing Collective, Bear Bait Dance, Clay Studio, all got $20,000 each. The roof project, I think in House Bill 6, I'm not sure of the iteration.
I think it was 125 in the BRAF budget.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it got lined in, but can't remember.
Okay. I think we need a break for questions, right?
Yes, we certainly do. Thanks to all of you for the great discussion so far. We're going to take a break for about 10 minutes. for Table Talk, which is kind of the heart and soul of City Club. For those of you not familiar with how this works, you talk to your table mates and you will all formulate a question to be asked. You'll appoint somebody to ask that question for you. We'll have board members walking around with microphones. So just when you're ready to ask your question, raise your hand. We'll come by. We will hold the microphone for you. Please keep your questions civil and respectful. We're going to have our best microphone wranglers on the job. If we feel we're crossing a line, we'll just move on to the next table question. So take about 10 minutes. See you then, and we'll begin Table Talk. Thank you. Are we ready for our first question?
Right over here. Bill Lombardi from Sealy Lake. Thank you, Senators and Eric Dietrich and the Montana Free Press. We have a couple questions from our table from John Ellingson, former Senate Majority Leader, my wife Jen, who worked for Brian Schweitzer. The question is, the middle class is getting squeezed more and more and more. Last session, we saw a $500 million property tax increase. This time, you're giving us a few shekels back. There's a income tax cut. Those making $2 million a year, the top 1% are getting $6,000 back a year, and the lowest 60% are getting $120 back. How can you justify that you're making Montana a place where we can live, work, and enjoy our outdoors? You're squeezing our middle class.
So I can talk to some of those tax statistics. So the reason, obviously, the more money you make, the more taxes you pay. In Montana, 1% of all taxpayers, 6,000 taxpayers, pay 30% of all of our income taxes. Be nice if we had more than those people, and then less of us would pay less. 30% of the taxpayers pay 80% of our income taxes. So 50% of the taxpayers in that bottom level pay about 1 or 2% of the taxes, and that's our tax rates are very progressive in Montana, and the top people are paying I don't have the exact numbers, but probably at least twice as much as the lower people as a percentage of their income. So that's where we're at. When it comes to the middle cap on property taxes, we've already talked about that. I'm not sure the state really has limited ability other than just shifting taxes from one taxpayer to another.
Yeah, and hi, Bill. Yeah, and so obviously I tend to agree with your sentiment that moving it from 5.9 to 5.4 for the wealthiest Montanans, as I said earlier, it's just going to mean that by 2028 we're going to miss out on about $278 million a year in tax revenue. And frankly, I didn't hear when I was elected again the public crying out for more tax cuts for the richest Montanans. And so I guess I feel that it wasn't needed, which is why I didn't vote for the bill. So you can cue Bernie Sanders on that one.
Great. Hi, Heather Adams, Arts Missoula. Thank you both for your service first. Our table is really curious about the arts and how the arts are connected. So, we know that arts are a driver of small business. We know the economic impact of the arts in our community. We know that it drives tourism. We know that it's huge for educational and emotional development of our children. So we're curious, when arts things come across your desk and whether to support them or not, how is that being viewed at the legislative level, and what can we do to better support arts funding through the state?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your work, Heather. And as I shared, there were a number of bills that did. And I hope folks that are not as surprised that the state of Montana, through coal trust money and other funding available, we do support the state arts. I always share that at the Missoula Children's Theater, when my little boy performs, take a moment and look up at the screen before they start, and it talks about that this local arts in Missoula, Montana is funded by coal trust money, right? And so we do what we can, but I do think what's relevant about the discussions we had in the hallway are the cuts that are going to sound like they're being made at the federal level. And so there was some pretty significant discussion on saving a number of days in our 90 allocated days that we may or may not expect that we will come back for a special session. Largely, we expect could be related to Medicaid funding being cut at the federal level, but certainly we've already been hearing of concerns for a number of other cuts, including to our arts. So please keep doing what you're doing and know that people at Montana, at this legislature, do care about the arts, and we certainly see its connection to Main Street business, commerce, and economic development. There's no doubt that we do see that.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add there other than Representative John Fitzpatrick, who was in charge of that one subcommittee, really kind of some people didn't show up and asked for their money they previously gotten, and he cut them out. I don't know whether those things all got back in or not, but yeah, if you want some money from the state, you need to show up too, so just remember that.
Hi, I'm Bob from Missoula. And my question has to do with the number of bill draft requests, the number of bills that go through the legislature. It's been said a couple times that we've had a record number of bill draft requests, record number of bills that we've seen. How sustainable is that increase in bills and bill draft requests? And would we be better off if legislators had a limited number of bills they could introduce as opposed to unlimited? Thank you.
Well, so Representative Carter, as two members of the upper chamber, we don't like to be told that we're limited in our bill drafts, because as holdover senators right now, the good senator and I, if you have a bill idea, we can introduce it today for you, right? And as holdover senators, we can do that work in the interim. And I think it's really important, because when you only are there 90 days every other year set by the Constitution, it really is drinking water from a fire hose. And so I think, although there's a lot of bill drafts, quite a few of them never see what we call prime time, right? And so the sausage factory being made, I don't know if that's the solution, but I know there's been a lot of conversations year after year that the state of Montana, perhaps, I think we're only one of 6 states that still does this citizen legislature meeting every other year type of thing. It's very difficult to balance your checkbook 2 years at a time. And so there's a lot of supplemental requests from fundings from agencies. We meet a lot in the interim, and it kind of just doesn't make sense. So again, just like we talked about the viability of a sales tax in our lifetime, I do think we probably will see a change to how the legislature meets again in our lifetime, just because of things like you just asked.
Yeah, and the number of bill draft requests, it's part of our process, is part of the problem as I see it. I had, I think, 100 bill draft requests. I introduced 59 bills, past 36, so I'm kind of do a lot of bills. But but also what happens is we're one of 4 states that every bill has to have a hearing. Most states are like, okay, there's bills I've heard in my tax committee for the last 6 sessions. Things are going to die. It's like and so most states have a rules type committee, which is controlled by the party in control. And they say, sorry, we're not going to hear that bill. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to pass. We're not wasting our time on that. And I don't think we want to get to that. One of the ideas that I had was every chairman in a committee can determine whether a bill is going to have a hearing. And then if that bill if more than 50% of the people on the committee want to hear that bill, then they can say, hey, Mr. Chairman, we want to hear that bill. And then also you need to protect the minority. I think so. You could also have a thing, okay, minority, you can pick 2 bills in this committee every week that you want to have a hearing on. So they can introduce their bills. But somehow we've got to put a little more control on our bills. But I don't think we'll get there. We've tried to, and we're probably just going to continue down the road we are. We passed 884 bills this session. Guess what we passed last session? 885. So it wasn't a big difference, although new legislators I think they saw a lot of things that, you always see that, but for people who have been around a while, it's just old hat.
I think the real problems are term limits, right? For a citizen legislature, term limits, from my perspective, are not a good thing, because it actually harms our rural communities more than our urban communities. In our urban communities, we can just kind of bounce around and keep running back and forth from the House and Senate for eternity. But at the rural level, they wouldn't have that ability. And so you continue then to not have good ideas continue to be worked on over time. You can never give up. Think about what I said about Senator Shane Morjo. He introduced that bill for 10 years. And it finally, Representative Marilyn Marlowe, another Missoula legislator, former city council person, She, for 8 years, introduced a bill to phase out styrofoam in the state of Montana. Now the governor vetoed it last Monday. But think about what that took her, 8 years to finally get a bipartisan coalition to do that, right? So never give up, never give up. And so that's why we don't want to limit folks being able to introduce their bill ideas, because never give up, keep introducing them. They continue, the sausage factory works.
Yeah, and it took us about 8 years just to get you allowable legally drink raw milk and buy it from your neighbors. How's that?
Food freedom every day of the week. Oh, here we go.
The county commission, the county commissioners are here.
I didn't vote for it, Commissioner. I didn't.
And Senator Hertz, you called me Senator. My phone's blowing up about my promotion.
Yes, I know.
Congratulations.
Sorry, you took a pay cut though.
That's true. But I got more time on my hands as well. So here's a question. So both of you guys described real shortcomings in the legislature. Senator Boldman said drinking from a fire hose. Senator Hertz said there are people who are voting for things they don't understand. 1,700 bills, as Bob Carter brought up. If you guys got to be czar for a day, the boss of the whole thing, think big. If you were to redesign the whole system, not worried about practicality in this moment right here, what would a new legislative system look like? Thanks.
What I would do, I would meet every year for 45 days. Right. 1 year would be a budget year. That's right. So every 150 legislators would understand the budget. Right now we got about 20, 25 people who understand what we're even voting for. And then the next session would be a policy. Obviously, you could have emergency situations when you need to have a budget in a policy year or policy in a budget year. Wyoming operates like that. There's a number of other states that operate like that. It's easier to, it's really difficult for legislators to walk away from their business or family for 90 days. 45 days would be, in my mind, a lot easier, make a lot more sense. The legislature would be engaged all the time. Right now, the executive branch and the bureaucrats, they're just waiting 90 days. These people are going to be gone. And then all of a sudden, we have no control basically for 180 days, unless we want to call a special session. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. And I will say that it's not just the Republican versus Democrat dynamic. I think I shared this in my remarks. The way to move forward in a positive way, if we were every year for 45 days, is just to also reflect on the number of bills that actually pass with wide bipartisan support. Those don't make the news as much, right? The kitchen table issues that we talk about, not every bill is transgender rights and bathroom bills and abortion bills. Most of the legislation we work on is actually interesting coalitions of folks. So for example, Senator Hertz and I, for a long time, have partnered to bring progressive housing policy forward. We have friends on both sides of the aisle that oppose us on some of the innovative, but the caucuses and coalitions we bring together really reflect what our passions are. I will say that the number of women in the legislature in the 15 years I've been there is a marked difference in the kind of commitment now we see to child care bills, to education spending. It makes me want to cry. Because in the time I've been there, we went from having one Republican woman in the Montana Senate, Senator Teresa Manzella, and now there was like 5. There's 35 women in the House and 16 in the Senate. That's a big difference. Women at the table, Indigenous members at the table, parents at the table. 10 years ago, my son was born when we were in the legislature, and he's 11 years old now. And now a number of my colleagues have little kids, both male Republicans and female moms. And having parents in the legislature and not just old retired white guys is a big difference in what we all care about. And so the citizen legislature and reflecting what our values back home look like, that's the bills that we're seeing. And that's why it's really important that we meet, I hope someday every year, but also don't limit the ideas because they do come from back home.
I might be old and white, but I'm not retired.
I wasn't pointing at you.
Hi, my name's Andy Nelson. I'm a resident of Missoula and Drummond, Montana. I work for the Montana Democratic Party, but I'm really excited about a bill that was actually brought forth by a Republican, Senator Greg Hertz. Ellie briefly mentioned it. It's the Montana Media Act. Can you talk to us about what that Montana Media Act bill does?
Yes, the Montana Media Act. Unfortunately, we didn't get any new money into it. We did extend it. It kind of got caught up in the whole budget process. And as we were getting out of control and spending too much money, there was things that just were going to come on the chopping block. And the governor's office and the budget office have never really supported the Montana Media Act. Unfortunately, the bill we have today has new policy in it. It really, going forward, promotes Montana-owned businesses. I think you have to have at least 15 FTE. It also qualifies a 10,000 square foot facility, because if we're going to make movies in Montana, a lot of the movie manufacturing, as I like to call it, is done indoors. People can come to Montana and they can shoot scenery all day long and then go back to Hollywood or Georgia or New Mexico and basically finish up their film. So we've got some good incentives in there. Unfortunately, we could not get any money in. I'm hoping we're not going to see an exodus out of here. But I think when we come back in 2027, we'll get a good report. Hey, did movie manufacturing leave the state? We've already heard from a number of people I work with. Yes, they're already looking at other states out of the country. And you just heard President Trump was talking about doing a tariff on movies manufactured overseas, because that's where a lot of people are going. They're going overseas because there's a lot of cheap labor over there and then get things done. And so we start losing that market overseas, it creates a lot of problems.
And just, this is such an awesome question, because I think folks back home, we don't want to throw our colleagues under the bench. I don't want to throw my fellow Democrats, or he doesn't want to throw his fellow Republicans. But the bottom line is, both Republicans and Democrats oppose the Media Act. Local Democrats here in Missoula, they call it welfare for Hollywood, right? But Senator Hertz, under the Bullock administration when it was first introduced, he was opposed to it. Now he's the bill sponsor, right? He could see the grassroots local economic development that it produced in Butte, Montana, in Hamilton, Montana. We all know what was there, right? Kevin Costner. And he could see that it worked. And that's the kind of incremental change over time that you really can create a coalition. Again, not Republicans and Democrats, people that understood taxes, economic development, and he made him the main supporter that got that bill through. Because he's right, Governor Gianforte was not a significant real supporter of it, which is why it doesn't have new money, but at least it continues the current system going forward. That film tax credit means so much to so many people, including the University of Montana and our tribes, because again, it has these different factors in it where you have to employ a certain number of Indian tribes and that sort of thing. So thanks, Senator Hertz, on that, because it really wouldn't have been passed. And we would have lost these films to other states. Utah at one point got rid of theirs, and immediately they lost all their film productions. Georgia, on the other hand, has no cap, and which is why you see everything from The Walking Dead to unlimited productions now in Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. So that's something to continue to watch in the state of Montana. I just want to share this about the media tax too. As a state that relied for 100 years on extractive industries, I now love the idea that we would import people here to spend money and film us for our glorious landscapes, for preserving those wild and open spaces, and not for the extractive money. So again, I'm all for the film tax credit and bringing folks here to make money off of the way that our history is and what our land looks like. So.
Hi, thanks. I'm Erin Kautz, and my question is, our question is, there have been a lot of cuts, obviously, at the federal level that are affecting Montanans. And so I was wondering, what's the state legislature? Do they have a response to some of that? And what are you all doing?
Well, a lot of that stuff it's under discussion. Obviously, DOGE, the big factor out there as they're looking at, and obviously we need to do something in this country. $37 trillion in debt. Less than 3 days interest is equal to 1 year of our general fund balance. 3 days of interest. So it's a huge, huge number. We're going to have to, if they make some massive changes to Medicaid, we're going to have to come back and we're going to have to make some changes. The Department of Education, if that gets eliminated, if they continue to send the money back to the state as a block grant, then maybe it won't impact us as much. Or similar with Medicaid. So there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know about, but we do have close to $1 billion sitting in our so-called rainy day funds that are there for situations like this that might happen and come in play in Montana. But you got to remember, of our entire budget, which I think is close to $16 billion a year right now, I think 47% of that number is federal money. So Montana is a big taker of federal money. Obviously, we're one of the largest states with a lot of federal land here. And so, but it's a little premature to determine what we're going to do, but we'll be ready to come back if we have to in a special session.
Yeah, sorry. I did mention earlier there was a lot of discussion and an expectation that we may likely come back for a special session. And again, largely related to Medicaid, because we do have a trigger in our state law that if there is any change to the federal compensation rates, that we have to address it, right? Like that's baked in the cake of our law. I will share, though, on behalf of the governor's office, which I don't do very often, that the lieutenant governor and him, this is the second session now, where they had what we were calling our own Montana DOSH, and that was our lieutenant governor had worked on the Montana Red Tape Relief Act, which was already taking a look at sort of our own idea of Elon Musk, right? And that we were going through to really find efficiencies. And there was, again, a number of, I think, pretty common sense things that they found to try to save the state of Montana. But obviously, I disagree politically with what's going on at the federal level, and I do think that it is very likely that it will trigger a special session.
Hello, my name is Racine Freedy. I'm with Western Montana's Glacier Country, and thank you both. Worked with you on a couple different bills this session. From your perspective, you've mentioned where sales tax is more of a when and not necessarily an if moving forward into the next years. If we have a three-legged stool and we've got two legs, we've got income tax, we have property taxes, and general sales tax comes in as the third, in your mind, does that lessen the pressure on the two existing legs and provide funding for the city and county governments, or is it just providing more revenue to keep things moving forward?
So that's a good question. I think it provides the biggest relief of pressure would be on property taxes. You know, I think our income taxes are in a fairly good place right now, where they should be. And a statewide general sales tax is not going to get passed by your legislature or signed by the governor of any party. It's going to end up on the ballot as a citizens' initiative. And the citizens of Montana will then make that decision as to do they want a statewide sales tax or not. Some of the problems with that is, oh, fine, you're going to collect a sales tax from us. What are you going to do with the money? And so that's why a lot of people have looked at constitutional initiatives. Fine, you pass a sales tax, 75%, pick your number, has to be used to reduce property taxes. I think in combination with the statewide general sales tax, then you could have a local option tax where you could give local municipalities, taxing jurisdictions, fine, you guys with voter approval in your jurisdiction, you can tack on another 1%, 2%, I don't know, pick the number. If your citizens approve that, and you can tack that on top, and then you can use that for additional funding for your local government. So that's kind of how most states across the country work. Eventually, I think Montana will probably get there, but I think we're probably still a ways out. But who knows?
And I was just going to share. So in January, the Montana Free Press did a poll. 52% of Montanans were dissatisfied with their income tax, but 74% are dissatisfied still with property taxes. We heard it every day at the legislature. And I do think, again, without us getting into class warfare here with the county commissioners or our local government, but I'm very supporter of local control and of our current government, but we heard every day about property tax levies, about TIF districts. I mean, certainly Senator Hertz could talk more about that, but it is a real issue that we're hearing from local citizens about every day that we're there.
And I'm not surprised. So property taxes, you either write a check twice a year or you see it in your mortgage. When it comes to income taxes, I can guarantee you, I'm a CPA, I was practicing for 10 years. People have no clue what they're paying in income taxes. They think, hey, did I get a refund? Great, I didn't pay any income tax. Number two, did I owe? Oh, I owed. They never look at what was my taxable income, what was my tax liability. Those people of you in business who are paying quarterly estimates, you know exactly where you're at. So that's part of the problem with income taxes and your paycheck. You don't know how much money's coming out for Social Security, federal income tax, state income tax. It's kind of a no-brainer. And so that's part of the problem. But property taxes are right in your face, and you know exactly what you're going to pay, when you're going to pay them. And sales tax, we have a lot of hidden taxes, too, in Montana. I mean, even you know how much money you pay for in taxes, federal and state, when you go down and get a gallon of gas, buy a bottle of wine, buy some beer. There's all hidden taxes in there. Buy sporting goods equipment. There's hidden taxes and all that stuff. Nobody really has an idea. Your utility bill. It's kind of there on the open now a little bit. You can see it in most utility bills, but there's a lot of hidden taxes that people just don't understand. And it's always nice to have the guy behind the tree pay your taxes and not you. So.
And one other thing about term limits and what you just asked is that, we have a saying in the legislature that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And the amount, because of term limits, the amount of control that lobbyists have at the Montana Capitol it's unbelievable, and it just gets worse every session. So certainly, respectfully to Northwestern Energy and other organizations like that, they're well represented. But the average sort of middle class taxpayer, there is no lobbyist interest for them, right? Nobody's going in, if you're a barista at Starbucks, to talk about your renters' rights, right? And so I just can't say enough about an engaged citizenship, right? And folks that are really paying attention and being active in some community organizations that really do have a presence at the Capitol. It's really, really important.
We are your lobbyists, and I started this session when I introduced bills. Senator Greg Hertz, Senate District 7, blah, blah, blah. I'm here representing the people of Montana and the taxpayers of Montana. Right. That's how I introduced every bill in committee this session. You need to think more about who you're there representing and not the lobbyists who, they do a good job at times. And, I have my issues with lobbyists. People are well aware of that, and particularly taxpayer-funded lobbyists that I always rail on too. Thank you.
With that, let's give a big round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending this. I think that we had a great discussion. Stay tuned for next month's forum. It's an exciting forum on wildfire. It's going to be an extended session, an extra long one, and we have some exciting panelists already lined up. So keep an eye out for our website and our social media, and hope to see you next month.
And I'm hanging around here, so if you have a question, come on up and ask me.